Welcome, everyone. My name is Joni Spain, and I'm a career advisor in the Jacobs School of Music, Office of Entrepreneurship and Career Development. And we are thrilled today to partner with the IU Alumni Association, specifically the Metro New York chapter of the Alumni Association, and the College of Arts and Sciences Department of Theater, Drama, and Contemporary Dance, to bring you a special presentation and an alumni panel discussion specifically targeted toward performing artists who are interested in jumping to New York to start your career, or you're already in New York and you want to pick up some tips and pointers. So now it's my pleasure to introduce Alex Tapnio. Alex is the co-president of the Metro New York chapter of the Alumni Association, and he'll introduce our presenter.
Hello, and thank you for having us, Joni, into the Jacobs School of Music. I'm thrilled to be part of this program and the IUAA's Metro New York chapter. We're delighted to be of assistance to the next generation of creatives from Indiana University. My name is Alex Tapnio. I'm an art history and biology major from COAS, class of 1999, and the co-president of the chapter. I want to offer my congratulations to the class of 2020. You guys did it. It was an interesting year, and I'm so glad that you're able to accomplish your goals. Before I begin, I want to acknowledge that these are uncertain times, but there's progress in the city as we enter phase one of reopening New York City with the cases of COVID going down. We hope that you're safe and healthy wherever you are. I want to take a moment to tell you about the IUAA. I am one of 3 co-presidents, and there's about a dozen of us that are on the board. We serve New York City's 5 boroughs and the suburbs of New Jersey and Connecticut. IUAA started when a devastating fire in 1854 threatened the existence of Indiana University, and our alumni banded together to help the university rebuild. And it is in this spirit that we continue to do activities. The population of our chapter is 14,000 living New Yorkers working in the New York City metropolitan area. And while we hail from many different areas, doctors, lawyers, university administrators like myself, I would make the educated guess that the majority of them are from 2 major groups. The Kelley School of Business, of course, because of our Wall Street and business of the city. And then, of course, the arts, entertainment, and performing arts professionals. And we are so glad to be able to have a panel today. Our chapter does have events that we've moved to virtual format, and we hope to be launching soon. A Welcome to New York event. We partner with the schools on their events, IU Day, and eventually Game Watches. My time with the Alumni Association, I've been focusing on arts and culture as an arts major myself, and we've had some events starring Broadway show Alumni, Jagged Little Pill was with Elizabeth Stanley, and The Prom with co-producer Gwen Arment. So we already have alumni from Indiana who are also making a big impact on the entertainment scene here in New York. And right before COVID happened, we were supposed to have an event with Joshua Bell, and hopefully we'll be able to have an event with him in the future. Today, we're going to present you with alumni with multiple backgrounds and stories of how we got here. And I hope that they'll inspire you to think about New York as a resource. For the next part of our event, we'll be hearing from IU alumna and Metro New York's newest board member, Hannah Hovarth, who's a class of 2017 graduate from Kelley with a degree in marketing and business law. And then we'll do a panel of artists. So thank you all. And I want to pass this on to Hannah.
All right, thank you, Alex, and congrats to the class of 2020 and all of those great things that Alex said. I am honored to be here to chat with you all today, just to tell you a little bit about myself and what I do and how I am in a position to help everyone that is, in New York and then currently trying to get there. So let's just see if I can share my screen and not have any technical difficulties. All right, hopefully you guys can see that. Okay, so first off, of course, I did want to tell you guys a little bit about me. 2017 grad. I loved my experience in Bloomington, and I majored in marketing and business law. I think it's actually called LEAD, Law, Ethics, and the Art of Decision Making while I was there. That's what it was called, or they had just moved to that. From South Bend, Indiana. My first job out of college was a district manager with Aldi for about 9 months before I really wanted to pack my bags and leave for New York. I didn't actually envision myself staying in Indiana for very long after graduation. I did have a dream of going to New York. I just didn't know how to get there. So I worked really hard for those 9 months, made some money, saved up some money, and just packed some bags and left. It was I think it happened within like 3 weeks. I crashed on friends' couches while I was interviewing for jobs here in the city and walked into Beacon Hill Staffing Group as a candidate. And then offered a job there permanently as a staffing consultant. Now I'm currently a senior staffing consultant with the staffing group Beacon Hill, and in our New York office. We actually have offices in Boston and Chicago and actually Indianapolis as well. So all over. So if you guys are not just going to New York, but potentially thinking about Chicago or Boston, I'm happy to refer you to someone there that can certainly help. So I know not a lot of people know about recruiters and what we do. I actually had no idea that staffing agencies existed when I came to New York before even meeting with Beacon Hill. I just didn't really know what they did or what they were. I know that there are placement agencies out there, but they do like end up charging candidates fees. Staffing agencies actually don't charge candidates fees, or most of them don't. They're actually a free service for candidates. Of course, they can't guarantee placements or jobs, but they can guarantee at least a little bit of help. So that staffing industry is a middleman in between, companies and then candidates. And I work specifically within office support and administrative support. So I work with candidates, a lot of performers, a lot of freelancers who are looking for temporary gigs, either day-to-day, week-to-week, or long-term in between assignments and things like that within office support. So anything from reception, office assistants, admin assistants, all the way up to like very high-level executive assistants and office manager. So those are the types of roles that I place on the temporary side, as well as full-time temp to perm. And then I work very closely with our direct hire team that does place direct hire staffing within administrative support too. I think nowadays those office support roles will be a little bit different. And I think we'll start to see, office assistants that are doing like cleaning after everyone is in the office, or even standing and pushing the elevator buttons or opening the doors. I think we'll start to see like a lot of different kind of gig work come our way, which I think will be interesting, and certainly something that recruiters will know and the staffing industry will know about first. And I think that's why it's so important. So when you are moving to a bigger city, to work with a staffing agency and a recruiter to just know what types of jobs are starting to pick up again, the new jobs that are coming into the industries, etc. So the number one question we're getting from all of the candidates that I'm calling every day is now a good time to actually look for a job anywhere, really? Because it seems like so many jobs are on hold, or people aren't interviewing, or they are interviewing, but they're not going to start the job until they're back in the office. We just overall as Beacon Hill think that there's no bad time to look for a new position. Yes, it might take a little bit longer right now, but working with someone and just applying, and if a job pops up on your career builder website or LinkedIn that you would be interested in, just apply. I think being proactive is very key, especially in this scenario, and just kind of getting your resume out there and getting your resume in piles and in front of HR, internal recruiters, staffing recruiters, things like that is just so important. And I have run into candidates that have just completely put their job search on hold just to be like, I'm going to spend this summer with my family while COVID kind of figures itself out. And so they're not even doing a search. So then that might lead to like less competition for certain jobs too. Or I think, people won't be willing as much. Sometimes people aren't willing as much to be flexible with their job search too. So that can also lead to less competition for certain jobs. So might as well just send your resume in and start applying for sure. Let's see. Okay. I think like this is the most important thing. And I think as performers, you guys already have like a no task too big or too small mentality. And that is so important with jobs right now. I think in this market and the way that the world is going, we just have to all be really flexible and just know that, certain opportunities will pop up that you may not have liked 6 months ago, but now it's a really good opportunity. So I think, researching, the organizations that you're interviewing with, if you are interviewing, and seeing how they treat their employees and just, see how stable they are. I think that companies that are very much, hiring and onboarding candidates right now are stable. And I think that's like a great company to work for then. You definitely will probably have to be flexible with the type of gig work that you're looking for. I think specifically for performers, the hospitality industries, catering, events, those are the big industries that they're in because it's very flexible. And I think like just weekend work and night work is just so flexible that way within those industries. So since what we're seeing right now is those types of industries are the most impacted, I think they're going to be slower to get back to normal, or they'll be working with 50% capacity and 50% of their staff. So I think we're just going to have to figure out how to take a different approach. So, taking that office assistant job for 3 weeks to make some money when you first get to New York will probably be the best bet, as well as just looking into other industries. I know that for the companies that we're working with right now, financial firms, we've seen, those kind of office assistant reception roles take a dip, but we are working with like biopharmaceutical companies where they need more staff. They need, people to put in data entry as more and more, jobs and opportunities come their way. So I think it's just a very interesting time, and we just have to kind of navigate it together. So your resume, I know for candidates, the resume can be kind of a sore point because you're just not sure what to put on it. I know a lot of the performers that I work with have kind of a couple different resumes where they'll have like a performing resume with a list of all of their performances. And then also a resume that has a list of all of the jobs that they've had, whether it was office or restaurant, etc. I think that no matter what, your resume should cater to the jobs that you're applying to, and definitely have the words in your resume directly relate to the responsibilities and the actions that you see in a job description, because it takes about, I would say, like for me personally, I will know whether I'm calling a candidate within 10 to 20 seconds of looking at a resume, sometimes even less. So it either gets deleted right away or it's put into a pile that I call. So I think the most important thing is to have, relevant experience as well as other experience on your resume that could, booster it. But then also, making sure to look at all of those requirements and making sure that the language and just the bullet points on your resume directly relate to what you're applying to is so important, and just helpful in getting your resume in front of those recruiters and actually being called. Now, editing your LinkedIn. I think it's so important to have a LinkedIn nowadays. The LinkedIn community is huge, even with like the IU Alumni Association and getting connected through that. That was huge for me to connect with everyone on LinkedIn, as well as, connecting with other recruiters and companies and chatting with, employees of companies that you're looking to be employed by is just so important. So you should definitely have a LinkedIn profile. And if you do take a look at my LinkedIn profile, which I'll give you guys the link later on, it pretty much is my resume. And I try to make them as close as possible. Of course, like I'm not putting my picture on my resume, but it is a place for people to go and see like the people that I'm connected with, the companies that I'm following, and just, to make sure that my resume matches to my LinkedIn. It's showcasing the same jobs and the software skills that I use. But then if I was looking for a job, I would very much be able to say, like, I'm open to opportunities in that headline area, and these are the opportunities I'm looking for. And that's kind of like a really good place to like put what you're open to, what you're looking for, a little bit about yourself, and why you're a good candidate, so that when, you know, recruiters are looking at LinkedIn to do their sourcing, they have a professional looking photo of you, and then can know your background and then what you're looking for quite quickly. And then that makes them more inclined to reach out as well. Also, there is a button on LinkedIn that you can click that says that you're open to new opportunities. So definitely click that. And that allows recruiters and like just gives LinkedIn permission to send like your profile to recruiters and like their projects and what they're looking for on LinkedIn. Yeah. And should you reach out to a recruiter, of course, I'm biased and I'll always say yes. Most of the companies hiring right now are probably using a recruiter to fill their openings and probably using a staffing agency just because they have been inundated with resumes since so many people are out of work and not everyone qualifies for a certain role. And then they're just not sure if someone's experience will match or if it can, you know, be made to match. So it just is going to be so important for people to reach out to agencies and just chat with them and chat with recruiters. If they don't have a job for you right now, there's definitely a way for us to get prepared with like a resume and a write-up about you, just so when that job does come our way, we can be very quick in responding with a good group of resumes and with your resume potentially. I think that, you know, we kind of have the first feel of how the market is going when, you know, downturns and upturns. So I think that's just so important to be chatting with a recruiter. And I've always, especially in these conditions, have encouraged my candidates to not just use me as a resource at Beacon Hill. Of course, I would love to find all of my candidates jobs, but I don't have access to all the jobs out there. There are a lot of other staffing agencies. So just do your research and look at agencies that are, you know, specifically recruiting for jobs that you're interested in and get connected to them. And it's okay to work with a couple of agencies just so that you can have a feel for a bunch of different things that are going on, and you can chat with a couple different people to get advice in general too. And I think it's just so important. Now, working with a recruiter during COVID-19, if you guys do choose to work with an agency and a recruiter specifically, I think the most important thing is just to be honest and, you know, talk about, like, I think the best case scenario is always to be honest. And I'm always honest with my candidates. Like if a job turned them down because they didn't have the experience, I'm going to tell them, or they didn't do a good job in an interview, I'm going to tell them. I think it's just so important to be honest, and especially be honest with your recruiter. I can't tell you how many times someone has said they weren't interviewing and nowhere close to a job offer, and then I got them a job offer, but they got another job offer and it came out of nowhere. And it just is a little bit frustrating, because if we had just known about that other job offer, we probably could have gotten them a higher offer on this side. And it just is like one of those things that we could have just worked together on. I think it's so important to listen and be flexible as well. I've definitely seen some interesting jobs come my way during COVID-19, and they may not have been what my candidates were looking for, but I knew the personality of my candidates, and I just would call them and be like, hey, are you open to doing this? We had like a couple of cold calling assignments come in for some consulting companies, and I knew a couple of candidates who were just really desperate for some jobs. So I just called them and said, hey, are you willing to do this for 2 days? It's paying $17 an hour. You're just going to sit at home on your computer doing data entry and cold calling some clients just to get some information. Is this okay? And yes, they were great. They were like, this is great. This is easy, something to do from home for 3 days, making some money. I think it's just so important. So definitely take their advice and listen to them about like resumes, and, you know, just interview tips and things like that, and just be patient and keep in touch with them during this time. Every candidate that I'm meeting with, I'm telling them, hey, check in with me every other week or so just to see how things are going, and just to stay at the forefront of my mind. And of course, then when something comes in, I'll certainly let you know, and then we can hopefully go from there. Now, I'll give you guys a chance to ask in the chat, and some of the questions that I know that some candidates will have, especially those of you who are trying to figure out moving to New York, etc. Should I move to NYC now? I think it is an individual choice on that. You have to weigh your pros and cons. Do you have friends that you could crash with while you're here, while you're looking for a job? Are you comfortable moving here? Do you have some money saved up? You kind of just have to consider all of those things. How do I find an apartment? That's one of the big questions I get from candidates that I'm working with out of state. Actually, the New York real estate market is very intense, and it's such an interesting place to be within real estate, I can tell you that. And it can be quite hard to find an apartment, but you have to be flexible as well with that. For me and my experience, when I first moved to the city, I actually did a sublet for 3 months. And then towards the end of that sublet, I was hitting the ground and looking for, a more permanent location. And I think that was just the easiest way to go, because in the sublet, it was furnished. So I just packed 2 bags and came to New York and started my job, and then kind of got my bearings and was able to figure it out. But I am in a couple of networking groups, and I know a couple of, real estate agents and brokers. So if you do have any questions and you guys are planning on moving here, I'm more than happy to connect you with them. And they are amazing people that really know the market and are able to chat with you guys about that too, since the real estate market is just so crazy in New York. Rent, I have heard, is going down and has actually been down about 10 to 20% for places. And there are good deals being made, which is great. And I'm actually thinking about moving because of that, or negotiating like a month or 2 months free, I think is a big thing now. And I think also with temp work, when, things are starting to pick back up again, and you guys might be seeing auditions start again, especially virtually, or if that's going to happen, with temp work, it is so flexible. I think it's just so important, even if you don't know your schedule, to just be able to be honest with your recruiter and just say, hey, I think I'm going to have auditions this day. And then just don't overcommit yourself. I think that's the most important thing too. It's just something that's hard to navigate, but over communication and just not committing to too much, I think, is probably important when it comes to like balancing temp work and auditions and other things that you're doing. Another big important thing before even moving to New York is networking. One, doing things like this, and then also just looking online for virtual groups that you can join, and just connecting with alumni, as well as other people within groups and friends is just so important nowadays too. I didn't know if you guys wanted to, I think I can stop sharing and then I can see the chat. I don't think I can see the chat now.
So do you want?
I can't see the chat. So do you guys want to tell me the questions that are being asked? Sorry.
I still see your screen sharing, Hannah.
Okay. How do I exit?
Does that open up the chat for you? To all of our participants, Hannah, thank you so much. This was wonderful information. Really, 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 really important tips and pointers and information. For any of our participants, Hannah is going to stay on the call, and she's available. And Hannah, I invite you to jump in on the panel discussion too if something comes up that you'd like to share. But any participants, feel free to put any questions in the chat, and Hannah's going to monitor that chat room right now. So we're going to transition now into our panel discussion. We've invited a group of arts and performing arts IU alums to join us for a panel discussion and answer your questions. So I'm going to allow them to introduce themselves and talk about their IU time and their what brought them to New York. So let's start with Caitlyn Louise Smith.
Hi, everyone. So I am a musical theater major. I graduated in 2016. I'm so happy to be here today, and my experience, I really can credit it to IU alumni. Hannah mentioned networking, and truly all of the jobs that I've been able to survive off of in the city have been because of my connections with IU alumni. So in my time at IU, I was pretty involved. I really tried to put my fingers in a lot of the pies. I was very committed to wanting to establish myself there. I was involved in the student theater group. I was involved in the honors college. I sort of spanned a lot of the campus, and that was something I really enjoyed. And I think it really helped me when I moved out of the city and into New York, because I was able to not only make a diverse group of connections, but I was very blessed, because getting those tips and those tricks of like how to also be an individual outside of performance was really helpful. I did a lot of event planning, and I did, just things that you wouldn't think of, but also make you a little bit more, I guess, not desirable, but like when you have more things on your resume to be able to fall back on. So I moved to New York. I actually got a job through my professor, Liza Gennaro, in the IU Department of Theater. And she got me, essentially she recommended me to, or sort of directed me towards a nonprofit called the National Dance Institute. And I applied, and I ended up getting accepted to be an assistant teaching artist there. So that's where my journey of becoming a dance teacher really started in New York. There's a lot of, for those of you that are interested in dance or musical theater majors, there's a lot of dance teaching resources, whether it's working with children, whether it's working in dance studios, or, even judging dance competitions. So I have quite a lot of knowledge in terms of teaching dance, and that being a side gig. I also, at one point, my first year in New York, I was auditioning in New York for an entire year, and I hadn't gotten any performance gigs. So I was pretty busy doing other things because I had to make ends meet. At one point, I think I had 4 jobs at one point at the same time. I also was a retail manager at Equinox. So I can sort of speak to that. Let's see, what else did I do? I got an administrative gig through Alumni. I was working with 2 IU alums that were trying to start up an indie film company. And now their progress has gone great. They have an entire academy in Indiana, and I still help them from time to time. And a lot of that, was just, I wasn't getting paid for it, but I was, I guess, investing my time into them, and then it really ended up paying off. So sometimes you just have to establish relationships and sort of learn and intern, if you will. And that will sort of lead you to more opportunities. So I did that whole thing and learned like the behind the scenes of creating film, which was great. I also ended up becoming a business manager somehow. I don't know how that happened. I just sort of said yes and just kept learning and working and discovering. And then I was producing an entire film. So that was interesting. And that was a journey that took me to places I didn't expect. And then I've done quite a few gigs. I've catered, I've done all sorts of things. But then eventually, I found my groove, and I ended up actually starting to really invest myself into my performance career. And I think that's a really important thing, because you can see all the things I was doing. I was committing myself to so many different side gigs that I sort of lost track of my performance career. So that's, I think, something that's really important. You have to, as Hannah said, you have to really think about balance and knowing why you're in New York. And I really feel like that time was important for me, but I needed to refocus. I got an agent, and then pretty much from then on, I have been performing. I did a cruise ship for a year, and now I'm on the Mean Girls National Tour. So I definitely have plenty of experience in terms of how to make ends meet, whether it's babysitting, whether it's, all sorts of things. But yeah, so hopefully that, if you have any questions, I can help answer that very specific niche.
Thanks, Caitlin. We have a second Hannah with us today, so I'll ask Hannah Marks to introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. I graduated from Jacobs in 2019, so I'm not even, I guess I'm a year out of college now. I was a jazz studies double bass major. I moved to New York in August, so almost coming up on a year here. So I don't have quite as much experience in the city before the shutdown, but I did get a solid 7 months in that were really valuable. I was very fortunate to land a job with Manhattan School of Music as my official title is Instrumental Ensembles Associate, but essentially working for the jazz department and the performance operations department as like a low-level administrator assistant type thing. So I was doing that part-time for my whole 7 months here. And about in January, I also picked up a job at the new school working as a bass accompanist for a couple of their jazz classes. So that was kind of my steady day work. And then at night, I was just trying to play as much as I could. I will second what Caitlin said, in that I think having these daytime jobs is really valuable. I have a lot of friends that are just trying to gig. It's super stressful, and you can sort of do it as a rhythm section player, but it's really hard in the city to just piece together gigs when you're first starting out. So I would highly recommend getting some sort of day job. I have been slowly getting more opportunities for performing. I've been working with some of the musicians in the Jazz at Lincoln Center Orchestra, and have performed at the Jazz Gallery a few times, which is a great venue in New York for up and coming jazz musicians. So things are picking up there. And I am certainly available always to talk about how to balance, balance performing and balance a regular job. I will say that in your day job, you can find sort of unexpected benefits always if you work your connections right. I've already been hired by a couple of the professors at MSM as a bass player. And so I think if you just kind of do your job well, even if it's not as a musician, it's still important to get your face out there and make those connections, and you can end up working for them in other ways.
Thank you. Dan, take it away.
There we go.
There we
Hey,
go.
everyone. Happy to be here. I'm really impressed by all the valuable advice shared so far. I really wish that when I was in school that I had access to something like this. I graduated IU in 2002, before it was called the Jacobs School. And I majored in French horn performance with outside studies in piano and composition. I think I'd like to take a slightly more philosophical approach to what I'm going to say. I think if there are a couple of key factors that helped me when I came to the area, it was realizing that when we're in school, there's a certain amount of social pressure to better yourself and be resourceful. And I think it's really easy to take some of that for granted. When you get out into the real world, it's easy to forget a lot of that stuff, to keep bettering yourself, to be in survival mode, which has its merits. But I would say if there's some pretty key advice that I have to myself 10, 15 years ago, it's take it upon yourself to seek balance, integrate concepts from other fields and from people with diverse backgrounds, be open, be kind, and be tenacious. I had a different set of advantages and a different set of disadvantages than I think probably many people on the panel. So again, I graduated IU in 2002. I'm originally from Central Jersey. about an hour and 10 minutes from New York and an hour and 10 minutes from Philadelphia. So a pretty awesome area to grow up in. And during the summers in college, I worked as a cocktail pianist. I used to play piano for Nordstrom department stores. And so it was easy to kind of walk back into that role. But the disadvantage was I walked back into a situation where I had a terminally ill parent. So there was the distraction from the career, but also the stability of being able to live with my parents during that time. So everything that people are talking about, regarding how to take side jobs and make it and survive in New York City, I'm privileged enough to never have had to do. What I can say is that when you go into a new city, there are differences in every freelance scene. And I can use Philly and New York as two key examples. When I moved back to New Jersey, what I found was that there were a number of musicians in Philadelphia that wanted to get me work. Some IU alumni, in fact. But the personnel managers and contractors were very protective of keeping that work in their circles and in their hire lists. With New York, the personnel managers and the contractors, they don't care. It's completely up to the players. So it's a very different networking strategy. And I would say one of the keys to moving to a new city is to really start to socialize and be open to new conversations and new opportunities and kind of get the lay of the land from people who are in it, which is why an event like this is so important. For me, I'm not charming. So I had to learn how to be good at auditions. I wasn't at first. It was a new skill set. Eventually, I phased out the cocktail piano, started teaching privately, went to a bunch of different local band directors and gave free master classes to their students to recruit new students and to provide value locally and build community, and started picking the brains of people who, in my mind, had made it, taking them out for a beer or going to their performances, meeting them after for a drink or a bite to eat. I didn't really drink much at the time. But yeah, it's eventually I learned how to be better at auditions, and I won a few jobs, one of which was principal horn in the Pennsylvania Ballet in Philadelphia, and then from then a few other positions, and eventually where I am now as principal horn in New York City Ballet, which is like dream come true and all be all. But thanks. But it was a long road, and the minute I graduated from IU, I had this like picture of how it was all going to work out, and then about 5 minutes later, I was like, that's not happening, at least not that way. So be open, be tenacious, be resourceful, and everything that everyone else is saying. Hannah especially hit it on the head. There's regarding sending a resume in, whether it's for a job or a music position that you want in terms of long-term career goals, make sure you contour the resume. I remember sending a resume for an audition for a military band, and I put my career objective as orchestral horn player, and they rejected me simply because of that. And so, I've had plenty of aloof and unaware moments like that. So kudos to all of you for doing this, and thanks for having me.
Thank you. And then rounding out our panel, we're inviting back Alex, co-president of the Metro New York chapter. So he's going to round out our panel today. Thanks, Alex.
Hi there, I'm the non-music, non-performing person on the panel with my art history degree. That said, I majored in art history and biology, and I struggled after I graduated. I remember graduation. I lived in Varsity Villas. I'm so sorry. And packing up my truck and thinking, I'm going to move to the East Coast. I moved to Philadelphia, and I lived there for a year with my brother. I thought that I was going to be in the museum industry, so I volunteered for as many things as I could. Of course, I applied, but having no museum experience yet, I got to feel the sting of rejection. But at the same time, there's so many institutions interested in knowing that I was volunteering. And so I did land my first job at the Academy of Natural Sciences, cataloging snails. Because there's the biology and art history. They go together, right? I realized that I needed to, one, get to New York, and two, get myself to a place that I could advance my career. So the way I got to New York was go through graduate school. And so I applied at New York University, where I got my master's in visual arts administration, which is a combination of business classes, art history, and arts management. Just so happens that they do have a music business and a performing arts master's. A little bit of plug for my other alma mater. But I wanted to be still in museum, and I studied development and fundraising. But one of my professors told me about corporate social responsibility and the fact that corporations wanted to still, we think of corporations as these big entities that are, they're consumer focused and they're money focused. But there are possibilities where they can be good citizens for their communities. And so I did studies on how do corporations invest in the arts specifically. And so when I graduated the year of 9/11, the economy was very different. And I'd written my thesis on how can corporations participate in using the arts to boost economy, to heal community. And so I was able to land a job at JP Morgan Chase. And much of my time was in music administration and dance administration. So I would spend most of my time looking at budgets and project proposals from the Phil, from the Met Opera and Met Museum. And it was a learning experience to take what I'd learned about museums and fundraising and visual arts and then apply it to performing arts. Rather than march down through my jobs, I just want to use that as a jumping point of saying that you might, I thought I'd be a museum person. I ended up doing so much of my career in performing arts. Now I am an alumni professional. Be open to the opportunities that come to you. Take those volunteer opportunities. There's no entry-level job too small. Well, maybe, but you'll figure it out which ones are the real connections for you. And the Alumni Association is here to help you network and to provide advice when we can.
Thank you, Alex. We have a great question in the chat to kick it off. So I'm just going to go straight to the chat for that. What would you have told your college self in terms of broadening your skill set, marketing yourself, or networking with the knowledge you have now? So in other words, what would you do differently?
I'd like to offer something for that. I was very aloof, and I think my ego got in the way quite a bit when I was younger. And I think I touched on this a little bit when I was talking before, but being open and putting yourself out there, no matter how vulnerable it makes you feel, it was essential for me, because that's the thing. At least in performing arts, there's a lot of vulnerability. And even if you look bad in the short term, you look great later on if you're humble enough to learn from it and improve. As a musician, when you're taking a private lesson with someone new to network or meeting someone new, your second impression or your second lesson is so much more important than the first one. So just allowing yourself to be open, vulnerable, and resourceful. It took me a long time to learn that.
I can talk about some concrete things that I did in college that I think were really helpful. I think maybe this is because I'm still pretty fresh out of everything that I'm like, I wouldn't change anything. But I took kind of great care in college to set myself up for life after school, mostly because basically since I was 14, I just wanted to be a professional musician and did not want to be in school. So I was kind of always like, I just want to get this done. I just want to get out into the real world. If it's Delia, I don't know if I'm saying that right, but I don't know what you play or what your field is. But during the school year, you know, I was just pretty involved in IU and doing the best that I could to be a student. But summertime was when I really tried to take advantage of other opportunities. So the summer after my freshman and sophomore year, I had several internships in Chicago. So I worked for various nonprofit organizations in Chicago. I worked for the Hyde Park Jazz Festival, Chicago Jazz Philharmonic, and Girls Rock Chicago. So I was doing like full-time nonprofit work there. And then also at night going out on the scene, trying to meet people. By the end of both summers in Chicago, I was playing a little bit as a bass player there. So I actually thought I was going to move to Chicago after college. So I was trying to work on setting up a career there. In addition to that, I also attended two workshops. So I attended the Banff International Workshop in Jazz and Creative Music in Canada. And then I attended Betty Carter Jazz Ahead in Washington, D.C. at the Kennedy Center last summer. And these really, really set me up for my network in New York. And I didn't even know that at the time. But most of the people that I attended these workshops with ended up moving to New York or were already working on their careers in New York. So by the time like May 2019, June 2019 rolled around, I sort of looked around and realized, oh my gosh, all my connections are in New York right now. I think that's where I need to be. So that was really important for me to just identify where are the people that I know and how can I connect with them when I moved. In terms of marketing, I ran a band while I was in college that toured around the Midwest, and we released an album, got our album in a major jazz publication. So I was doing the best that I could to also, you know, have the broader world know about me. I will say though, when I got to New York, I actually took a bit of a step back, sort of what Dan was talking about with the ego. And I said, okay, I'm new in this city. I don't need to be as aggressive. Like I was pretty aggressively like me for a long time. And I was like, let me take a step back, listen for a while. Oh no, oops, getting a phone call, sorry. Let me take a step back, listen for a while and see, you know, what's happening on the scene. Where is my place? So I think it's important to take that time to step back at a certain point, assess, and then you can come forward again when you're ready. Hope that was a good answer.
Caitlin, there's a great question for you in the chat, and then we'll come back to Colin's question next. Thank you.
Perfect. Just to also add, I will say, I think for a lot of excited and young performers wanting to move to the city, I think the first initial instinct is this blind passion and ambition. And I think for me, I had that. I'll never forget Twyla Tharp had a Q&A with us towards the end of our senior year. And I asked her, like, what would you recommend a new performer going to the city? And she said to me, harden your heart. And I remember thinking that was like the most dark and depressing thing ever, because I was so excited. And I think it's really important for someone moving to the city to know that, yes, you're moving to the city for your craft and your art, but also know you're moving to New York City. And it is its own place. And not everyone is meant to be in New York City, and that is okay. I moved there and I felt so at home, but not everyone does. And I think it's okay to come to terms with that, because there are so many other great cities out there that's not New York. And at the end of the day, if you move there and it's not right, that's okay. And you will find another path. And there's not one set path to success. So Kate asked about the logistics of how I was able to transition. So I think honestly, it really is where you invest your time and your energy. The thing is that everyone has said it, like if you are saying yes to opportunities, you will find yourself in places that you never expected. And I think it's so important to be a yes person, but at some point in your life, you have to say no, and you have to shape what your path you want your path to be. And so for me, I was saying yes to so many opportunities that it was sort of clouding um, where I was really headed and what my goals were. So I think for me, I had to start looking at my priorities, know that I had these great day jobs that I really, really loved and that made me feel like I had perspective in terms of my career. But at the end of the day, I had to sort of take a step back and really look at what my actual goals were, and then essentially write out how I could get there. For me, I decided to no longer work for the National Dance Institute, which was it was during the day, and so I could still do afternoon auditions because it was like for morning classes. But again, it was hard for me to always go to all the auditions when I was essentially working every morning. And they would let me out sometimes, but not all the time. For me, I think so much of it is working smarter and not harder. So instead of like always going to every single audition that there ever was, really be thinking about what am I right for? And that's for me, I realized I really needed an agent. And for theater students and musical theater students, I don't really know how it works as much for musicians, but to have an agent essentially is sort of a great way to have someone advocating for you, and also to get in rooms that you may not be able to get into. And for me, that was how I was really able to make it work, because my agent was able to set up appointments for me. And so if you have an agent setting appointments for you, figuring out like when you can audition and how it can work around your schedule, it makes your life a lot easier. And so it was actually like after having an agent for I think like a month or two, I got my first gig, which was Tracy for Royal Caribbean. So I think sometimes you just sort of have to look at the brass tacks of everything and really make sure that you're on the path of where you want to be, because it's so easy to get caught up in the city.
Thanks, Caitlin. Colin has a fabulous question. How do you balance networking, day job, and practicing? So if you want to get better at your instrument and you no longer have the luxury of 7 hours a day in a practice room or 4 hours a day in a practice room, so how do you invest in your craft? And I think a subsequent question to that is, how are you keeping your edge and your performance edge during a time of pause in live performance?
I can talk a little bit about how to balance everything. So my job was only part-time, and I was very lucky that they kind of knew what my hours were going to be as a jazz musician and scheduled around that. So I worked from 2 to 6 p.m. every day, which meant I had the mornings free to practice or play sessions with people, and then at night I would go out. So I think you have to sort of what Kaitlyn was starting to say is you have to be really, really choosy. There is a good period where you can, say yes to everything, but then you'll probably hit a point of being overwhelmed and you have to start narrowing down. So as a jazz musician, for any field really, but networking is so important. I basically would have specific targets. So if I'm going out to a show, yes, I'm going to hang out and listen to the music. But a lot of times there might be a specific musician that's playing that I want to play with. So I'm going to that show with the intention of meeting that musician, or if I've already met them, I'm showing my face again, I'm talking to them. And then something that my friend brought up to me is that also take a look around at who else is at that person's shows and meet them as well. So that was sort of my strategy. And then as far as practicing, this is not necessarily for everyone, but I do better on shorter time constraints. So if I had, 2 hours in the day, that honestly is even more motivating for me. I'm like, okay, I only have 1 or 2 hours to like get this done. Because I didn't even really feel like I had the luxury of endless practice time in college, but I think you just have to really learn how to manage your time well. If you have to wake up a couple hours earlier to get your practicing done, then, do that. So, and then right now I'm actually enjoying the opposite end of the spectrum, which is having nothing to do really. So for the first time in my life, I am actually practicing all day. I never really did that, to be honest. So it's fun to experience both sides of the coin.
Dan, do you want to speak to that, to the balance of practice and?
Sure. There's so many variables in this equation, and your balance is going to change over time. It depends on your personality, who you are in that moment, what's going on around you, like COVID. Your balance right now is going to be vastly different. Also, it depends on your instrument. Like, I am so lucky that my instrument doesn't let me practice more than a few hours a day. Like, my lips just can't handle it, so I have an excuse. Yes, trombone. All right, brass. Yeah, we have an excuse. This is why many of us are so laid back. But except for trumpet playing. Yeah. Anyway, I think there are too many variables for me to recommend something for everybody. It's just you have to be open and able to look at yourself in the mirror and say, what do I need in this moment, and what's the best use of my time? And the more organized you are with that, I think the more successful you're going to be. Sometimes, especially in a freelance scene in New York, sometimes it's actually more important to be a good human being than it is to be the best possible musician. Other times, you got to be able to lay stuff down, and you have to be the person to do it. And knowing how to capitalize on those opportunities and plan for them and put yourself in those situations at the right time, it's just going to come with experience. There will be moments where you wake up and you hear someone else play and you're like, crap, I can't do that, or I can't do that yet. And that'll light a fire under your butt, and you'll address it, and you're going to have plenty of those moments, and that's okay. So, allow yourself to be shaped by the necessities of your surroundings. That's what I can say.
I'm aware that we're coming up on our time. We're coming close on our time, and I think we've covered the questions that have been put in the chat. But I do want to just take a moment to address the elephant in the room, which is COVID-19, and that's caused a pause in the performing arts for now. And so I just want to give our panelists an opportunity to address that or talk about how they're using this time. Hannah mentioned that a little bit already, or what their predictions are for this next chapter.
Well, I'll say something. I genuinely, I think it's going to come back in waves. And for musical theater, at least, I know it will probably be, but honestly, between audiences feeling comfortable to come to the theater and us actually being able to do the show is really what it comes down to. Essentially it's spread through the air. So, and for musical theater students that sing, or the opera that sings, it's the elephant in the room where we're constantly having spit particles everywhere. That's needless to say. So I think it's going to be for our industry, probably not until summer of 2021, or whenever there is a vaccine and people feel comfortable. I genuinely feel like, because of how it was handled, our country is behind, and I'm hoping that we're able to take those steps in the right direction. I also fundamentally feel like if we don't have funding to do it, we're going to also be set behind. So I'm hoping that we are able to get that support that we need, because I think that theaters and we our lives depend on it. So I hope that that works out as well. But yeah, I think the experience of live theater can't be captured in a stream or a digital version. And I think people will be wanting to come back to live theater. It's just making sure that we can do it safely for not only audiences, but for the performers as well. So
I just want to take a minute to mention to the participants too that Alex has been putting some phenomenal links in the chat. And Hannah Horvath has put her contact information if you have questions about working with recruiters. All of that is in the chat. So before the call ends, be sure you pull any of those resources that you're interested in following up on. Any other final comments from our panelists about COVID-19 or the next chapter or what's next for you?
Well, I was going to say that, there's going to be so much opportunity for writers to be thinking about how they're going to present their craft and how they're going to work with a team in this setting. So are there going to be one-man shows? Are there going to be very small casts or more intimate ensembles, but in bigger spaces? Pay attention to what's happening. Sign up for newsletters from the Phil, the Met, Chamber of Music America. Just research those organizations now and learn about what they've done in the past and their statements on COVID, because they're going to tell you, they're going to announce they're eager to open too. And so stay connected. And that's my biggest advice to you right now about what to think about COVID and New York City.
And I think anybody can connect with any of our panelists on LinkedIn too. Hannah, did you have a final? Hannah Marks, did you?
Yeah, just a quick thing. I think this time, it is fraught with uncertainty and a lot of crazy things. But I also am grateful for this time to slow down. And I think there's a lot of skills that can be gained that are outside of our normal realm, whether it be, on a tangible level, like I'm trying to finally learn more about recording arts. I didn't really pay that much attention in my class in school, and now I'm like, oh my gosh, I need to be able to figure out how to record myself and do all that. So you can learn like tangible new skills like that'll help you after this is over. Also just using this time to continue to build relationships with my mentors and friends. I think it's also interesting that probably a lot of the musicians that you've always wanted to reach but were too busy, they have more time right now. So I took 2 lessons with people that I really admire that probably would never really have time to instruct me, but they're out of work too. So I think if you reach out to some people that you've maybe been wanting to get into contact with for a while, they actually might be more receptive than usual. So that's one thing.
Well, this has been just phenomenal and wonderful information and great energy and just real vision for this next chapter, which is a lovely thing as we're all sitting virtually in our own homes. And thanks to all the panelists. Thanks to Hannah for the presentation about working with recruiters and what that's all about. I just really want to thank the Metro New York chapter of the IU Alumni Association for bringing us this opportunity. And thank you to all of our panelists for your generosity of spirit and for your time.